I'm Jason Epperson. This is Parkography, and it's time for the latest in national park and public lands news. First up, the Trump administration is considering a surcharge for foreign visitors to national parks. This was buried in the 130-page budget brief from the Interior Department that was released recently. It says, quote, in 2026, the National Park Service will establish a surcharge for foreign visitors that is estimated to generate more than $90 million to keep America's national parks beautiful. If that $90 million figure is accurate, it would amount to about a 30% increase in national park fee revenue, which, contrary to how most people think about this, doesn't really fund the national park system. Congress allocates about $3.3 billion to fund the National Park Service. Fee income is only about 10% of that, and it's mostly used for discretionary projects like upgrading campgrounds, building wheelchair ramps, stuff like that, and something we'll get to in a little bit. The last time the National Park Service published foreign visitor statistics was 2016, when National Park Service sites saw 13.3 million international visitors. The National Parks Conservation Association estimates that 14.6 million international visitors went to national parks last year. Only about a third of National Park Service sites actually charge a fee at all, mostly the big well-known parks. Usually the charge is per vehicle. It's unclear how the Park Service would institute the international visitor fee, but it's not unprecedented. Some other countries have increased fees for foreigners, and even here in the US, some state parks charge lower fees for in-state visitors. The proposal comes at a time when Congress is deep in negotiations on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed by the House of Representatives and is now going through the reconciliation process in the Senate. Drips of details of sections of the Senate bill have been coming out as individual committees finish up work on their sections. The $1 billion cut to the Park Service that the Trump administration has requested isn't yet in the bill, and the idea of transferring federal land and potentially smaller National Park Service sites to the states may be dead in the water, but the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee section of the reconciliation bill keeps the House's stripping of all remaining Inflation Reduction Act funding for the Park Service, roughly $267 million dedicated to rebuilding staffing capacity across park units, will be cut. The legislation would require the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service to sell off more than 3 million acres of their land holdings. Respectively, it's less than 1% of each agency's lands, but much of the land held by these agencies is in sensitive areas directly adjacent to 120 different National Park Service sites. The stated purpose is to make more land available for housing development, but the bill's broad language would give states and local governments wide leeway on how that land could be ultimately used. Again, I want to make it clear, this is the Senate version of this bill. They're changing up the language. It will then also have to go back to the House, and then the House has to agree with what the Senate has done. So there's a lot more that has to be done on this. Unlike the more narrowly focused House version passed in May, which targeted specific lands already slated for disposal, this Senate version opens the door to much broader sales across nearly every Western state, with the exception of Montana. The bill does include some guardrails. It prohibits the sale of national parks, of course, monuments, wilderness areas, and lands within mining claims or existing leases. It also gives tribes and local governments the right of first refusal, meaning they'd have the option to buy the land before it's offered to private buyers. 5% of the proceeds would go to local governments for housing-related infrastructure like roads and water lines, and 5% would go to the federal land agencies for deferred maintenance. The other 90% would go into the federal government's general fund. Utah Senator Mike Lee, who heads the committee, has long pushed for transferring federal lands to states. There is some pushback from within the Republican Party to these provisions, however. Montana Senator Steve Daines and Idaho Senator Jim Risch have said publicly they don't support selling public land. Montana Representative Ryan Zinke, Trump's former Interior Secretary, also played a key role in removing land sales from the House bill earlier this year. More in a moment, but first, thanks to this week's sponsor, Slinky Stove. It's the only patented collapsible fire pit that stays intact when packed. Lightweight with a compact design, it's perfect for RVers and car campers, and it sets up in seconds. With Slinky Stove, you get smokeless airflow rings and a clean burning fire. No more dancing around campfire smoke. Inexpensive and packed with extras, the Slinky stove offers a 3-level cooking system that gives you flexibility, whether it's morning coffee or evening campfire chili. And with contained ash, cleanup's quick and easy, just the way it should be on public lands. Order yours now at slinkystove.com. Yellowstone National Park has released its visitor statistics for May, showing record visitation. Yellowstone hosted 566,000 visitors in May of 2025, up a whole 8% from May of 2024. 2024 was the busiest year ever across the park system, but not at Yellowstone. 2021 was Yellowstone's busiest year ever, and this May's visitation was up 20% from 2021. So far in 2025, the park has hosted 762,000 recreation visits, up 6% from 2024 and up 17% from 2021. We're seeing two things happening here. National parks still growing in popularity, but also people more willing to travel to parks in the shoulder season. May isn't typically one of the busiest months for Yellowstone. The dense snowpack is still thawing and many of the entrances don't open up until mid-month. A typical July will have around 1 million visitors, or nearly double the May visitation. Late Sunday afternoon, June 8th at approximately 4 p.m., park rangers at Royale National Park received 2 separate reports of 2 persons found deceased at a remote backcountry campground within the park. 2 rangers hiked overnight 11 miles to the Glacier campground to assess the situation, arriving early Monday morning confirming 2 persons found deceased. Due to the remote location of the campground, a fixed-wing aircraft and a helicopter were used to assist with transportation for the investigation, which remains an ongoing investigation now being handled by the FBI. And no other information has been provided by either agency, including the names of the victims, though authorities say they have been identified and their families have been notified. The day before the bodies were discovered, a Redditor posted a thread entitled "Screams at Glacier South" on 6/6/25, asking, was anyone else in the campground last night and hear all of the commotion? It was kind of frightening, and we're wondering if anyone knows what's going on. Of course, we'll follow up when we know more. A tragic incident at one of Olympic National Park's most iconic landmarks, the popular Solduck Falls area, was closed for much of last week as park officials attempted to recover the body of 18-year-old Grant Harridge, who died after falling over the nearly 50-foot waterfall. According to reports, Harridge had crossed the upper portion of the river when he slipped and fell into the water. He briefly resurfaced, but then disappeared again beneath the falls. A search began immediately with park rangers deploying swiftwater and rope rescue teams. A ground crew combed the riverbanks, and thermal imaging was used to try to locate him in the water. Late on June 9th, a ranger found Harridge's submerged body pinned between 2 drops of the falls, but as of yesterday, a recovery has still not been possible. A park spokesperson said that the flow has made the canyon too dangerous for a safe recovery effort. The water channel at that point is just 7 to 8 feet wide, creating intense hydraulic forces in the narrow canyon. The park says it will complete the recovery as soon as conditions allow. Harridge had just graduated from Vanguard College Preparatory School in Waco, Texas, and was planning to attend Baylor University in the fall. Baylor University has since created Memorial Scholarship Fund in his name. Yosemite National Park has announced it will be able to open all 13 park campgrounds this summer, marking the first time since 2019 that all campgrounds have been able to be open due to various renovations and natural events. These additional openings will add approximately 500 campsites available to the public for enjoying the park. As of Monday, Going to the Sun Road is now fully open for the season at Glacier National Park. Visitors will be able to drive the entire 50-mile length of the road and access Logan Pass from both West Glacier and St. Mary entrances. Timed entry vehicle reservations are required to enter Going to the Sun Road via the west entrance past Apgar Campground and the North Fork of the park for those traveling by vehicle or motorcycle through September 28th, 2025. Timed entry vehicle reservations will not be required to enter Going to the Sun Road from the east side of the park at the St. Mary entrance. Vehicles and vehicle combinations longer than 21 feet or wider than 8 feet, including mirrors, are prohibited on sections of the road. At Logan Pass, visitors will discover lingering winter snow and should be prepared for cold temperatures, wind, and icy conditions. Daily shuttle service along Going to the Sun Road will begin operating July 1st on a first-come, first-served basis at the Apgar and St. Mary visitor centers. And as the summer season gets into full swing, National Park Service officials are reminding Blue Ridge Parkway visitors about the many closures due to multiple reconstruction projects underway along the historic 469-mile route. Most parkway miles are currently open for travel and recreation, with more areas expected to open across the summer and fall. After 2 years of planning, design, and construction, the bridge connecting Zion Lodge to the Emerald Pools Trail System at Shuttle Stop 5 in Zion National Park is once again open to visitors. The project, led by National Park Service engineers and contracted construction teams, involved lifting the historic bridge off its original unstable foundation and relocating it approximately 100 feet upstream. New concrete abutments were built to provide a stable, resilient base capable of withstanding Zion's dynamic environmental conditions, including flash floods and landslides. The entire project was funded through entrance and recreation fees. The bridge closed in May of 2023 after a nearby landslide destabilized its attachment to both its concrete abutments and the ground underneath. While the bridge itself remained safe for the time being, park engineers determined that relocating it upstream outside of the geologically active zone would provide a longer-lasting solution. Zion also announced that this past Thursday marked its 100 millionth shuttle boarding since launching the Canyon Shuttle system 25 years ago. The lucky rider Alex Weist was just trying to catch the bus and ended up being part of park history. He was surprised with a commemorative t-shirt and gift bag from the Zion Forever Project, the park's official nonprofit partner. The Zion Canyon Shuttle system was first introduced to tackle a growing problem in one of the most visited areas of the park, Zion Canyon. Back in 2000, Zion welcomed about 2.4 million annual visitors, and by last year, that number had nearly doubled to 5 million. The shuttle has become a central piece of Zion's visitor management strategy, operating from spring through late fall to reduce traffic, pollution, and damage to sensitive resources. It shuttles visitors between the town of Springdale, the park entrance, and up through the canyon itself, keeping cars out of the scenic core of the park. In September of 2024, Zion became the first unit in the National Park System to fully transition its shuttle fleet to zero-emission electric vehicles. That upgrade was made possible through a $33 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation, with support from the Park Service, local counties, and nonprofit partners. We've recently been reporting on closures at Army Corps of Engineers recreation sites due to staffing issues. The Army Corps of Engineers is the second largest operator of campgrounds in the world, right after the U.S. Forest Service. Well, now we get to share that one of them is reopening. Tompkins Campground at the Tioga Hammond and Cowanesque Lake projects in Tioga County, Pennsylvania, will reopen Monday, June 30th, and will remain open until Tuesday, October 14th, extending its normal recreation season closure by nearly 6 weeks. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Baltimore District closed access to the campgrounds on March 13th, following initiation of a federal civilian hiring freeze on March 2nd, which prevented operations at some of the facilities. This was one of the first of dozens of Army Corps of Engineers campgrounds and recreation site closures that have swept across the east of the country over the last few months. All reservations made prior to the closure announcement were canceled. New reservations are required for the remainder of the camping season. And in state park news, a former employee of Florida's Department of Environmental Protection has filed a whistleblower lawsuit claiming he was fired for exposing secret plans to build golf courses and hotels in 9 state parks. James Gaddis, who worked as a consultant in the Department of Environmental Protection's Office of Park Planning, alleges he was retaliated against for leaking documents that revealed plans for large-scale commercial development in protected parkland under Governor Ron DeSantis' administration. The proposals sparked bipartisan outrage, public protests, and were ultimately scrapped. According to the lawsuit, Gaddis was instructed to create secret maps for the proposed developments and was told not to discuss them with other colleagues. Gaddis says he copied the documents onto a flash drive and passed them to an unnamed intermediary. The next day, the Tampa Bay Times published a report exposing the plans. Afterward, Gaddis says he was summoned by a supervisor, admitted to leaking the documents, and was soon placed on administrative leave before being terminated. Gaddis is now seeking at least $100,000 in damages. Meanwhile, Florida lawmakers responding to the public backlash have passed a new law banning this type of development in state parks without public input. Governor DeSantis signed the bill into law earlier this year. Gaddis has also launched a crowdfunding campaign to help cover his legal and personal expenses. His original goal was $10,000. but as of mid-June, it has raised over $258,000. And the Indiana Department of Natural Resources has announced it will stop printing paper maps after this season. A DNR spokesperson told Axios that the state currently spends over $110,000 a year on the printed guides and plans to redirect that funding toward park operations instead. The state just placed one final order to carry them through this summer's busy season. Once those are gone, the parks will fully transition to digital maps only. That's it for this National Parks and Public Lands News Roundup. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button. Consider sharing it around to your community. Subscribe if you want more like this, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.